This, my friends, is Access Atlanta. It's a new podcast that shares the best things to do, see, eat, and experience. This is Shane Harrison with Access Atlanta, and this week I'm here with our dining editor, Ligaya Figueras. She's going to bring us something that I think everybody's really going to enjoy. Welcome.
Thank you.
Tell us what you brought for us this week.
How about a case or two of beer?
That's something that everybody can enjoy.
I do believe it's hot. It's just the perfect time. Beer lovers would tell you every day is a good day to drink beer, right? But it's hot in summer, and there's nothing like a cool, frosty beer.
Yes, that's true. There's something about summer. I mean, we love beer all year round, but really, summer seems to be the perfect time to pop one open.
Absolutely.
So what have we
So what
done?
exactly is going on? Well, of course, what we like to do, too, is pair things up. And people who listen to this podcast might also be interested in, picking up the paper. Check us out on AJC.com. But our beer writer, Bob Townsend, who's been writing about beer for a really long time for the AJC, he did a series of beer stories, and not only is it a great time to drink beer, but it's a great time to write about it. There is so much action going on. People who partake in beer have been really excited for the law change that went into effect, regarding that allows the breweries to sell on premise directly to the public.
Right. That's
a big thing. In the same time, we see this explosion of new breweries. You see expansions, experimentation.
Right.
So it's time to talk about all that, and these series of stories that we just put out there really can give great context to what's happening in the Georgia beer scene, and especially in Atlanta. Right.
Yeah, I mean, I love it that it's like you used to have, just a few types of beers. There was your dark beer and your light beer, and that was about it. Right. And now there are all these unusual varieties.
Oh, yeah.
I really love it.
I would actually say now I'm not a huge beer drinker, but right now I love a good sour beer. Yeah. And of course, one thing, why do I like it? Well, there's a bit of comparison to something like champagne, right? That bubbliness. Mm-hmm. But people who didn't know what Brett was before now can say Brettanomyces, and we know a little bit of what's going on. And you talk about barrel aging programs and that kind of thing, things that we really have never seen before. They're doing some phenomenal things. And while Bob admits that Georgia may not be the best when it comes to craft brewing, it certainly has improved from where it was when he first started out 20 years ago.
Yeah, and I mean, it's amazing the expansion of it. You see a new brewery popping up all the time, it feels like. It's like constantly reporting, there's this new brewery coming. There was recently a new one on the Beltline.
That's right. New Realm, for example.
Yeah.
Well, what I think is fun, too, this brand new thing, and again, folks can tune in as we talk about it a little bit or read up on it, but the Atlanta Beer Bus. It's the shuttle bus that will take riders from brewery to brewery to brewery, and you can taste off on a whole lot of different kind of styles, different places. A lot of it's community too. It's not just drinking beer. So that's a lot of fun. There's a lot of ways to have a great time as a beer drinker these days in Atlanta.
Yeah, and you can learn how it's done too. It used to be such a mystery. It's like, how does this happen? And now you can see it for yourself and hear it directly from the people who are making it.
Oh, absolutely. For sure.
So is there anything else we need to know?
Yeah, we just need to get cracking open a beer. That's what we need to know.
All right, that sounds good. And let's see what Bob Townsend has to tell us about the beer scene in Atlanta.
It's summertime, it's hot, you're hanging out in the backyard, grilling and chilling with friends. What is missing? That's right, a cold beer. I'm I'm Ligaya Figueras, the food and dining editor for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Today we are talking beer. And to do that topic justice, joining me in the studio is Bob Townsend. He's a longtime beer writer who, among other things, writes the Beer Town column in the AJC. Bob, thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
You bet. So you've been writing about beer for more than 2 decades now, right?
That's about right. I can't exactly remember my first Beer Town column for the AJC, but it was about 20 years ago. Wow.
Okay, so beer nerds, they would really love to have your gig. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got into beer writing in the first place?
I think I always say I was kind of born into it because I grew up on a small family farm. Both my grandfather and father were home brewers long before Jimmy Carter made it legal. We had home brewing rig in the basement, and as a little kid, I was operating the capper and doing all kinds of stuff with my dad like that, much to chagrin of my mother, who kind of was a Methodist and didn't drink herself. So it was an interesting little family dynamic there.
I didn't know that backstory about you.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
But how I actually got into writing for the AJC was through Susan Puckett, and we actually had a beer column before I took it over. Michael Scooby, who was the book editor, started the original beer column, and I can't remember what he called it. But when he left, Susan asked me if I wanted to take it over, and I said, sure thing.
Well, you've really shaped it into your own, and you've been telling us for a long time about what's happening in Georgia beer, and lately there is a lot going on, to the point that if folks are into learning more about the beer scene, there's just so much. You've come up recently with a beer series for us that people can find on AJC.com.
Yeah.
But a number of stories that you put out there. You wrote them right now because there's just so much activity. Can you talk a little bit about what... It was one of your ideas to put this series of stories together. What prompted you to say, you know what, it's time to really show latest developments in Georgia?
Yeah, well, we've had a couple of periods that I write about. I'm not good with dates, so I'd have to look them up exactly. But really, we've had a couple of periods. One was when the alcohol limit was raised, and that caused a lot of things to change in the state. That really had a lot of beer bars and retail and, on-premise accounts coming through and, able to sell a lot more things that they weren't able to sell. More recently, in September, though, the rules got relaxed to let breweries sell directly to consumers. And that really has created the ability for small breweries to kind of burgeon in the state. So you really don't have to be a big production brewery, bottling, canning. You can have a tap room and make money and brew your beer, and it's a much smaller kind of model and a much easier kind of business to get into.
Right. So one of the stories that you wrote on the state of Georgia beer, you compared that when you first started writing about beer, Georgia was tied with Mississippi as the worst state for craft brewing. So how do you think we compare even nationally, if you can talk about that now?
We're certainly not the best, but we have some of the best breweries. And that's always been kind of the case. If you really look back and you think about breweries like Sweetwater, Small Brewery of the Year, in the nationally, multiple medals all over the place, Terrapin medals. More recently, we've had Jekyll, Monday Night, Max Lagers, Top Torch Top, Cherry Street. They've all been recognized. So we have some great breweries. Mm-hmm. We just aren't known as a place like Asheville or Portland or California or Colorado.
Right. So you also mentioned you called out a few breweries right there, but in one of your articles you really pointed to 6 brewing companies here in Georgia that you think are changing the game right now. You just mentioned Sweetwater. Can you talk about a few of the breweries that for you, they're really standing out right now, whether because of, the quality and the popularity of their beers or, the expansions or even some of the experimentation,
It's style. All of that. It's all of that. It's the quality. It's New Rome, which I said is one of the biggest game changers. World-renowned brewmaster Mitch Steele, who was with Stone Before that, he was an Anheuser-Busch brewer, believe it or not, but he's a guy who really knows the technical side of brewing. He just has great expertise.
We'll pause for a second as you mentioned Anheuser-Busch, because I did grow up in St. Louis, which, there's some attitudes a little bit there toward, believe it or not, he's from Anheuser-Busch. But, from a standpoint of if you're cheering for the little guy and some of the craft brewers, there is some incredible things that are happening at a very large scale level, right? I mean,
well, technically they know how to brew, and their brewing is consistent. So if you compare them,
that's right.
If you compare them to the mom and pop versus McDonald's, the fact that McDonald's is able to go all over the world and produce a Big Mac, Budweiser is produced the same in every way. So a brewer who grows up doing that and becomes a brewmaster has a lot of technical abilities, and that's what somebody like Mitch brings. When you talk about Creature Comforts, they're probably the hottest Georgia brewery, just, for a lot of reasons. But, the beers they produce, their sort of culture of creativity, and the fact that they've just made a big leap to open a huge automated brew house, it means that they are really growing it. I mean, they spent $11 million on this new thing. So that's obviously, amazing kind of investment in the state and what they're doing.
Right. Now, you mentioned a couple names there. Are there some other people right now in the industry, especially Georgia brewmasters, that you really have your eyes on, or even, just folks who are there in the brew house who just have an incredible ability to make a great beer?
There's a lot of people who've been around for a long time, but again, I would point to some of the brewers like Mitch who are there, and I think we're going to see great things from them. The Creature Comforts guys like John Roberts, who's been around for a long time with Max Lagers, the guys at Torch Hop, Chris Bivens has won some medals. So, there's a lot of good brewers out there right now.
So we're talking here on the brewery side of things, but as a beer drinker right now, it seems like there might never have been such a great time to be a beer drinker than now in Georgia. And apart from so many of the new breweries, I know you wrote recently in your Beer Town column about the Atlanta Beer Bus, which is another way for beer enthusiasts to experience beers being produced from a variety of in-town breweries. Can you tell us what exactly is Atlanta Beer Bus? Because it's pretty new here.
It's brand new, and it's really fun. I did a little ride on it a couple Saturdays ago, and it takes you on a loop. The cool thing about it is you don't have to get on a bus and do the tour. You know what I mean? Like, next stop here, and somebody is leading you around. You can hop on and off at will. So it's usually about 30 to 45 minutes between each stop. You can spend as long as you want. Actually, I didn't get to as many breweries as I wanted to because I ended up seeing a bunch of people I knew at Scofflaw and ended up talking to Travis, the brewer, about what they had going on, and it just ended up being a crazy 2 hours there. But then I did hop on and go to a lot of other places. But what's really nice is it's just a shuttle. So essentially, it's like MARTA for beer or something.
Nice. So how much does it cost?
$15, which if you think about an Uber or Lyft ride to one brewery.
And here you can go to as many as, how many are on the tour?
I think there are about 8 to 10.
8 to 10.
And you also have MARTA stops that they will take you to on the way. Park Tavern, where you can, is like a central location in Midtown. So they've thought it out pretty well. They have 2 buses right now and a limo that they utilize sometimes to pick people up. The cool thing is you can text them and say, when's the next one coming, and they'll text you back.
Okay, that sounds like beer nirvana.
Yeah.
And so when does it operate?
It operates mainly on the weekends.
Okay.
Yeah, mainly on the weekends. And
nice.
And it has a schedule. If you go and look at my story, I have the whole schedule.
Okay, yeah, we will look at the story. Now, and who's riding this bus? Is it
It's the one thing I say in my piece is if you're sort of a little older and you're not into the party bus scene, you might not enjoy this because they do have, pretty loud music, rock and roll. You can kind of request your music if you're a small party. And, people are drinking beer and having a good time. So it's a fun thing, but it's maybe not for everybody.
All right. Another activity, I guess I would say, in terms of exploring. I mean, I need to get on that bus and explore that one. But that's going to take you in town, right?
You have to drink some beer.
I have to drink some beer, too. By the way, can you drink beer on the bus?
No.
Okay.
You cannot drink beer on
the bus.
bus.
That's when we'll...
That's one difference
with
some
the
of the
water
sort
bottle
of tours.
moment, right?
Yes.
Okay,
I keep my water bottle, yes.
Rehydrate. No, but anyway, you talk about, so we've got the Atlanta beer bus that takes us to some in-town breweries. For folks exploring outside the perimeter, another story that you wrote for us on development is just what you're seeing in Roswell in terms of, a community that's really on the rise as far as for anyone who's interested in checking out a beer scene. So what excites you about Roswell?
Well, like I said earlier, you have smaller towns scattered around the southeast, Asheville being a prime example. That's very compact, and they're just known as a great brewing town. You can walk around and you can go to breweries, and there are breweries of all sizes. Atlanta is a much more spread out, commuting, large city with a lot of suburban areas. But what's starting to happen is in those suburban areas, and especially the revitalizing of these small towns, like Roswell has always been known for Kansas Street, where you could walk around, go to antique shops, go to cool restaurants, bars, stuff like that. Now it's getting a couple of breweries that make it definitely worth a trip and a destination, to go there. And Gate City has been around for a little longer. It's run by a couple of business partners who've been very active in Roswell, and they just created this really cool destination, a fairly big brewery, a really big tap room, food trucks. It's a scene.
Right. Nice.
Yeah. No. So you can walk basically from what you're doing on Canton Street up the street and go to this. You can walk down the hill and go to Variant. And Variant's a really new brewery that a lot of the younger beer geeks are really excited about. They do a lot of interesting beers. Right now they have this beer they call Splody.
Splody.
Which is a sour beer that they fruit with blueberries, strawberries, and rhubarb.
Actually, that sounds delicious, especially this time of year. Nice.
But they also make, they make IPAs, they make a lot of other stuff, and it's kind of the hot brewery right now, for a lot of the people who are into the new and the interesting beers.
Right. You mentioned Roswell. You also mentioned earlier Athens. Are there any other pockets, neighborhoods, even if you want to call them that, where you're saying, these clusters where, hey, you can go hang out, have a beer, and, essentially bar hop or brew pub hop?
Yeah, I think what's happening is sort of small local breweries like we were talking about before with the taproom model are kind of embedded in certain communities. Like Eventide in Grant Park is very community oriented. They have farmers market there. On Saturdays you can go and hang out, and it's just a very community thing. In Decatur, you have like 3 breweries within, less than a mile of each other.
Right.
Like, 3 taverns, and starting out with that, and you can go from bar to bar and brewery to brewery in that area pretty easily. Not as easily walkable as Roswell, but there are definitely a lot of pockets.
Right. Now, another one I wanted to ask you about, because you mentioned you have a story going on gastropubs, and obviously for me as the food and dining editor, I'm especially interested in the food, and it's been great to see, and it's not just here in Atlanta where we've seen this, but this real attention paid to the food side of things, whether it's going to be food and drink. Food that is matchable with the beverages coming out of there, or just simply, an attention to better food, where they're sourcing it. It's not just, once upon a time, I guess you could get some, pretzels and beer queso dip or whatever, and now, it's much, it's different from that. I think one of the places that I'm thinking of too is New Realm. They have a really thoughtful menu there.
Yeah.
So what are some of the other places?
And a real chef.
And a real chef, that's right. Julio Delgado, that's right.
Yeah. There are a bunch of them that I read about. the thing is, I wouldn't necessarily call them gastropubs. I call them
okay.
brew pubs.
Okay, call them brew pubs.
But they have that sort of, when we go back to gastropubs, that idea that the food should be just as good as the drink. In other words, you don't just want a burger and fries.
Right.
You actually want some good stuff.
Or fish and chips.
So from the Earth is one. Tim Stevens, huge background in fine dining in Atlanta. Worked for some of the bigger restaurant groups. Good friend of Kevin Rathbun. Kevin Rathbun consulted on his restaurant. The former founder of Sweetwater is the brewmaster, Kevin McNerney. So he's really knows how to brew. And you've got a menu that's fairly sophisticated. I mean, he's serving Wagyu steaks and really interesting stuff. I mean, he knows sourcing, he knows chefs, he knows the food business and the hospitality business. So you walk in there and you definitely don't feel like, it was your old school beer bar.
Right.
Good Word is another one that's really interesting. It's in Duluth, and it's two former Brickstore Pub employees. And, that group is responsible for Kimball House and the new Watchman's, and a lot of those people have come up through that. So their menu is maybe not as fancy, but every bit as sophisticated. They're brewing some really cool beers there. And, that part of Alpharetta is really interesting and up and coming. I mean, sorry, Duluth. I said the wrong one.
No, I hear you.
Yeah,
so,
Duluth.
We're going to switch it a little bit to what should we be drinking right now? Because if there is one time of, I guess beer is great all year round, right? But there is nothing like a beer in the summer when it's super hot. Would you say?
Yeah.
Okay. So you did compile a list of what you're calling, the top. Should we say top, best? I don't know. Not necessarily into lists, but it's always nice to have some reference.
Well, that I resisted the best, and we talked about doing a lot of just different beers, but I decided to just focus on IPAs and their sort of cousin pale ales, because frankly they're the biggest category of craft brewing right now, and there are a lot of people in Atlanta and Metro Atlanta, around the state, that are making really good ones.
Right. So you got a dozen Georgia-made IPAs or PAs.
Some of them might be sort of controversial. I think one of them that would be controversial to some people would be Sweetwater 420. It's a pale ale. It's not especially sexy, but I think it's a good example of a really great sort of gateway beer for people who may not like craft beer. I mean, it's a beer that you could have at your picnic on the weekend and give to your uncle or somebody who does like good beer, and they wouldn't turn their nose up at it. It's a very solid, very good beer. Obviously, Tropicalia had to be on there, as again we call that a beer that built a brewery. And the same thing with Scofflaw Basement, an IPA that's been so popular and sometimes in short supply. So those are some of the things that are on there.
For you, what's the funkiest beer on that list, do you think?
I don't know. I don't think any of them are super funky. I would say the most interesting is Han Brolo, which is a pale ale that has a lot of really interesting ingredients. It's low in alcohol. It's very light, fruity. It has some lactose in it, so it has a kind of a different kind of mouthfeel. Right. Very refreshing, very easy to drink, and that's gotten a lot of accolades. It's sort of a big buzz beer right now.
Okay,
from
nice.
Monday night.
Now, so that's what we can have immediately. I actually wanted to ask you a trend that I just am fascinated by, which took off a few years ago, is barrel aging and so many barrel aging programs. Which Georgia breweries do you think are? And especially it's something that we got to wait for it. It's going to be it takes a while. So. Who's on your radar for there?
One of the six, again, coming back to Sweetwater.
Sure.
They're the biggest, and a lot of people don't give them a lot of credit, but they built this barrel aging facility about a year and a half ago. I guess it's been maybe not that long ago, called the Woodlands, and it's kind of a brand, not really a Sweetwater product on the bottle. It's Woodlands, and they're just doing, they invested a lot of money in a whole new building to do barrel aging, and they're doing foeders, which are big upright barrels that you'd see in Belgium, lots of wine barrels, bourbon barrels. They've gone full on with it, But, they still really only have a few beers to show from that program because it's a long-range investment. Right. In the meantime, one of the other trends that's going on is they built this beautiful space that they use an event space, and they're really having a great time. I mean, people are doing their wedding receptions there, and it makes a really cool venue for things, Yeah. So obviously this is another trend of things you can do now that the law is a little more relaxed.
Right. Well, so looking forward, anything else that you've got your eyes on as far as...
Yeah, there's a bunch of stuff, but some of them I don't even want to put on here because of their stories that I'm working on.
They're so top secret.
No, they're not top secret. I just don't want to get scooped, and you don't want me to be either.
There you go.
But there are some interesting things going on with beer and things that are going into beer. Some really interesting projects now that are very, in the lab oriented. People are playing with a lot of different substances to do different things. There's some interesting things going on with barrel aging in another direction with some other types of alcoholic beverages that are actually going back and using beer barrels that have been used for other things. So there's this kind of circular thing going on. So there's a lot of really cool stuff that's on the horizon right now that I'm looking forward to writing about.
No, one of the things that has been really fun to watch too is that shift from bottles to cans. I think that's been just nice to see. And
well, it is, and it's really hard to find anybody that's a newer brewer who isn't using cans. The funny thing is, though, at this year's Craft Brewer Conference, as you might expect, the people who manufacture bottles are trying to start this whole trend of why you should go back to bottles and why bottles are actually superior. So we'll see how that plays out. I don't really have much hope for them, but I think there's some problems with recycling in some places, and so there's going to be another little skirmish over that.
All right,
to see what happens.
We'll watch for your story on that.
Okay.
All right, so before we sign off, I can't let you go without putting you on the spot. What is your favorite Georgia beer to drink right now?
Well, when somebody asks me that question, I always go back to, I don't remember if you remember this guy, but remember the Cajun chef Justin Wilson?
Yes.
Who had that show? And he used to always end up with that little glass of wine, and he had the statement, he said, "The kind of wine I like is the kind of wine I got." So usually my favorite beer is whatever new that I've been turned on to. But not to dodge your question, this time of year I really love drinking Pilsners, and there's a lot of really good ones. 3 of my favorites right now are from New Rome, Euphonia Pilsner, the classic Creature Comforts Vivo Pilsner, and Three Taverns Prince of Pils, which is a great beer to drink. They actually first designed this to watch with World Cup soccer, so that would be a great beer to have with World Cup soccer.
Perfect. That sounds... I'm into soccer. I'll get into this beer too.
You ready to drink a beer?
Absolutely. Let's go for it. All
okay,
right. Hey,
cool.
Thanks for joining me.
My pleasure.
Let's see what's happening in and around Atlanta over the next 10 days. Georgia Ensemble Theater has teamed up with the Chattahoochee Nature Center to fill a few summer nights with music. The company is bringing back the concert version of Ring of Fire, the music of Johnny Cash, on the Ben Brady Pavilion stage this summer. Performances will happen Thursdays through Saturdays from July 12th through the 28th at the Chattahoochee Nature Center in Roswell. The show packs in more than 24 classic Cash hits, including I Walk the Line, Boy Named Sue, Folsom Prison Blues, and of course, Ring of Fire. This is the 4th consecutive summer for the Georgia Ensemble Theater Chattahoochee Nature Center partnership. In addition to the show, attendees can enjoy all the amenities of the Nature Center and bring a picnic to dine on site. There will be a cash bar available before and during the show. Patrons may reserve seating either at a table under the covered pavilion for $36.50 or $365 for a table that seats 10. There's also general admission lawn seating for $16.50 per person. The Nature Center opens at 6:30 p.m. on performance night for ticketed patrons to enjoy the exhibits and grounds, with the show starting at 8 p.m. Tickets are on sale now at get.org. That's GET for Georgia Ensemble Theater.org. Imaginary Worlds is back with a menagerie of all-new massive living plant sculptures throughout the Atlanta Botanical Garden, both at the Midtown and Gainesville locations. Take a fantasy journey through a storybook-themed world of sculptures, both indoors and out, most of them custom-made for the garden by the exhibition's creators, International Mosaic Culture of Montreal. Revisit the magic of the original blockbuster show, which ran from 2013 to 2014 with larger-than-life, topiary-like living sculptures. This time around, the sculptures are even bigger. Steel forms are covered in soil and sphagnum moss and planted with thousands of meticulously groomed plants in a process that takes nearly half a year. Throughout the exhibition, guests will also get the chance to enjoy the sculpture in a whole new light at night, when they're illuminated on Thursday evenings during Cocktails in the Garden. Imaginary Worlds continues through October 28th at the Atlanta Botanical Garden in both Midtown and Gainesville. The tickets are $21.95 or $18.95 for ages 3 to 12. Go to atlantabg.org for more information and tickets. Callan-Wald Fine Arts Center offers a great way to spend time with friends, unwind, and listen to an evening of live music with its annual Jazz on the Lawn series. Grab a blanket and a picnic dinner and enjoy the tunes surrounded by the natural beauty of the Callan-Wald Amphitheater. Or you can just let Fox Brothers Barbecue do the picnic catering for you, as they'll have some tasty stuff for sale at the concerts. Up next, on July 13th, is Atlanta trumpeter and vocalist Joe Granston, who always puts on a great show. That's Jazz on the Lawn at the Amphitheater at Callan-Wald Fine Arts Center on Briarcliff Road in Atlanta. Joe Granston performs July 13th, and general admission lawn tickets are $25 in advance online and $30 at the show. VIP table seating is available too if reserved in advance. Head to callanwald.org to buy tickets and to check out the rest of the series lineup. With a cast of 40 Atlanta actors and a 4-story ship that sinks nightly into an actual lake, Serenbe Playhouse's production of Titanic the Musical is sure to be spectacular. When the show first bowed on Broadway in 1997, it won 5 Tony Awards, including Best Musical. And more than 20 years later, Serenbe Playhouse is bringing the large-scale musical to life in a way it has never been seen before, on the water. Serenbe Playhouse is a professional theater that produces site-specific performances and programs that connect art, nature, and community. A couple of years ago, they brought in an actual helicopter for their production of Miss Saigon, so this kind of large-scale spectacle is nothing new for them. But all the special effects in the world would be worthless without the talented cast and crew that put these shows together and perform them for hundreds of people every night. Go watch them make magic in the Serenbe community in Chattahoochee Hills in South Fulton County, beginning July 11th and running through August 12th. Tickets are $35 to $43 and available at serenbeplayhouse.com, where you'll find a complete list of performance days and times and directions to the site. For more things to do around Metro Atlanta, head to accessAtlanta.com. Our senior editor is Nicole Smith, podcast edited by Ryan Horn, music by Bo Emerson and Billy Ewan, and I'm your host, Shane Harrison. Join us next week for more Access Atlanta.